Welcome to Talk the Walk. I'm Sarah Wong. On May 10th, Yoon Suk-yeol will take office as president of the world's 10th largest economy. South Korea's conservative career prosecutor has vowed to tackle corruption, strengthen economic security, and be more confrontational with North Korea and China. Gender issues are also front and center in this election, with Yoon accused of rising to power on the wave of anti-feminism. Ultimately, what made Yoon Suk-yeol, and what does his electoral victory mean for South Korea and its position on the world stage? We now turn to Hyunsu Yim, feature writer at the Korea Herald, who's been covering Yoon's campaign. Hyunsu, welcome to Talk the Walk.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, Yoon Suk-yeol won the presidency by the narrowest margin in your country's democratic history, is less than 1% exactly. He also needs to deal with a supermajority held by the opposition party in the National Assembly. Does he have enough of a mandate to implement some of the controversial changes that he had campaigned on?
It's a very good question. As you mentioned, we had an election earlier this year in March, and it was one of the most contested elections we had. As in fact, he won by the slimmest margin in the history of democratic South Korean politics.
Right.
So now that he will take office in the coming month, but as you said, he's also up against the opposition with a supermajority in the National Assembly, and there are some of the issues that he has pushed for during his campaign that will face challenges. For example, he came with the support of anti-feminists who is among his supporting blocs, and one of his biggest campaign promises was to abolish the Gender Equality Ministry, whose Korean name is the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. And to follow through on that promise, he needs the support from not just his party, within his party, but also he has to persuade some of them sitting on the opposite end of the political spectrum. And that will be likely challenging for Yoon, in the sense that this idea of abolishing this gender equality ministry has been South Korea's latest culture war front. Liberals, progressives, young women, they very much see this ministry as the symbol of gender equality. Despite criticism from conservatives, they think that this ministry not only helps women, but also children and senior citizens. On the other hand, conservatives and a lot of older women who voted for Yoon see this ministry as divisive in that, for example, their argument is that, do we really need a ministry that has a woman in their name? What about men? They feel that this ministry has run its course. That's the word from Yoon. So that is one thing to look out for as he takes office in May.
Yeah, essentially, I guess that the sentiment among male voters would be like, you know, the sort of politics that the ministry represented is sort of overcompensating in a way. But we'll get to gender equality and feminism in just a moment. But before, I want to talk about one of the articles in the Korea Herald that you wrote, titled "Is Yoon Suk-yeol the South Korean Trump?" I mean, to be very honest with you, I can see the similarities. They're, you know, conservative credentials, lack of major political experience, populist messaging, anti-feminist rhetorics, hawkish world will, anti-China, etc. I guess I wanted to tell us which one of these aspects bear the most of Yoon's parallels with Trump to South Koreans. And I mean, first of all, how do South Koreans view Trump? Is he as divisive in South Korea as in the United States?
Well, just to clarify, my story is headlined, "Is Yoon Suk-yeol the South Korean Trump?" and that has been the question that was asked during the campaign, is still being asked. And that piece that I wrote was quite divisive. There were a lot of people on the left of the political spectrum who agreed that Yoon resembles Trump in that he has relied on using divisive politics to gather support. But on the other side of the political spectrum, there were many conservatives who think that Yoon's rhetoric has not been as aggressive as Trump. So let's look at where these comparisons are being made. For example, he has made remarks that many will consider controversial or divisive towards different groups. For example, China. He has once said that a lot of young people especially, do not like China. So there was questions over whether this was something appropriate for politicians to say. But you can focus on the rhetoric, but whether Yoon will be that different from Moon when it comes to China policy, that is a whole different question. If you go back to how Yoon and Trump are similar, they're quite similar in that Yoon has been using this rhetoric of sticking to slogans. For example, one of his popular slogans have been common sense, for example, and fairness. And that was aimed at a series of scandals involving politicians and people who have been tapped by President Moon, who had some issues regarding special treatment. For example, Joguk, who is a politician, he was accused of giving his kids were accused of being given special treatment because of his power. So all these things played a role. But interestingly, some of the cabinet members that have been picked by Yoon himself are now in a similar spot. So, that's something that it will be interesting to look at going forward.
I guess you've also mentioned Cape Trumpism in your article, and I would like to take a look into that as well. And you use that term to describe the phenomenon of a rise of, I quote, alt-right movement in South Korea, in your country. And I wonder, is Yoon's rise in power a result, would you say, a manifestation of that phenomenon, or his popularity is essentially a starting point to help create and help bolster the movement? Which one is the end and which one is the mean?
Well, I think this is the question of chicken and egg, which came first. It is true that before Yoon, there was a great deal of misogyny and there's a great deal of extremism that has been rising in online spaces in South Korea, similar to many other Western countries that had to deal with the rise of online extremism. But I think when Yoon won, before Yoon's victory was delivered, there were some worries among experts that I spoke to, experts on extremism and social affairs, that if Yoon wins, it will be seen as a message of victory to these people who were looting for him. And for example, the message against the Ministry of Gender Equality. If Yoon lost, let's say, then going after the Ministry of Gender Equality, for example, Yoon also once said that structural discrimination against women no longer exists, despite the recent survey, which said that more than half of South Koreans do believe that this country is not equal to women. But by Yoon winning, I think it certainly bolstered communities like anti-feminists in Korea. They were celebrating on the election night that yes, they feel almost vindicated and validated, and certainly these messages have become more mainstream, you could
I
argue.
see. All right, well, hold that thought. We'll talk more about that after the break. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.